Welcome everyone to our very first episode of this brand new podcast, Leading with Agility, from all of us here at Humble Associates. My name's Arif, and together with my friend and colleague TK, my co-founder, we're excited about kicking off this brand new podcast. We've not done something like this before, so this is the first time we're podcasting, and I'm quite excited about this new world. We're very comfortable doing online webinars on LinkedIn and that kind of stuff, but podcasting is a brand new world. TK, I don't know, what are your immediate thoughts about podcasting, and how do you feel about this brand new adventure we're about to start? And obviously we'll tell our listeners more about what we're doing, but your first words on a podcast. This is amazing.
My first words on a podcast. That sounds like completely wonderful. And what I would say is, even though you say it's a new technology, it just sounds so lo-fi.
Yes.
You can just hear our voices, right? I'm excited as you are.
I have nervous energy about this. So
Okay.
to all of our listeners out there, first time listening, please be kind, but your feedback is always welcome. Please do share it with us. We're on social media, especially LinkedIn. You can find us there.
Yeah.
What our podcast, Leading with Agility, why are we calling it that? Why are we doing this podcast? I think we deserve to tell our listeners a bit about it. And of course, who are we at Humble Associates? I'll start there. Humble Associates, I'll start with that, and then we can talk a bit about this podcast. You can help me out, fill in some of the blanks.
I definitely shall.
Amazing. So Humble, we've been running Humble for about 4 years, nearly. It'll be 4 years in January. Time flies. What is it? What was it all about? The intention was, I guess, we are experienced Agile practitioners. We've been working with agility for many, many years in all different shapes, sizes, and forms, typically transforming organizations and helping organizations apply Agile ways of working. And so we decided to form Humble Associates as a way of kind of bringing our own unique, passionate way of helping make that a reality for organizations out there, but in a particular focus of helping all those organizations who are not really technology focused to explore the wonders and benefits of agility. That's how we started, didn't we, TK? Do you want to add something about where we've got to now, maybe?
Oh, it's been quite a journey, I think.
It has.
What we've seen while helping organizations is that the organization's culture and the responsibility of leaders for setting it up is one of the profound ways an organization can succeed or fail. So this is why we've decided that, well, it's not that we've decided, the market demanded that we focus more on leaders. And we thought, well, what's the best way of reaching leaders? We're using, other ways on social media. And we thought, it would be a good idea to record a podcast addressed to leaders and people helping leaders grow, like L&D professionals. But yes, leadership and leadership coaching has always been my passion. I know it always has been your passion, Arif.
Yes.
And I think now we finally decided to dive in it head first.
Yeah.
Not only just the toes and fingers.
Only the toes and fingers. Indeed, that's right. I think a few things about who we are as well. Maybe TK, do you want to introduce to our listeners a bit about you? Because there's probably many of our listeners who don't know who you are, who don't know who I am. So do you want to spend a minute just introducing yourself, maybe?
Of course.
Yes.
It's interesting that someone recently said that I might even be a minor celebrity if you're watching LinkedIn because I go live every day. But essentially, I'm not at all. And I don't claim myself to be. I am a leadership coach, a person that speaks his mind. So I've started as a technology expert, became a leader on my first day at work, it seems. I don't know how. And I've always progressed these two paths, a path of, technology, a path of, then I've changed it to a path of being a helper. Being a coach, but also being a leader at the same time. So I've held these two things, and they came together in my stance as a leadership coach. There's all kinds of certificates, clients, and everything I worked for. But if you want to check it out, check my minor celebrity status on LinkedIn. It's easy to get to tk.coach. But Arif, you've got some great experience yourself, haven't you?
Yeah, thanks, TK. Yeah, so that's your TK.coach goes to your LinkedIn profile. I didn't know that.
Yes,
Okay,
I'm full of surprises
I'm
around
full of
that.
some, every day learning something new about TK. Very good. Thank you for that, TK. Yeah, similar kind of journey, I suppose. But I studied for my sins computer science and somehow fell into technology and then agile practitioner for many years, 10 years or more, doing various agile type roles. And like you, then started having this thought process about where am I going with my kind of career, but also, how do I help organizations with this agile thing? Because some of the stuff I was doing, I just didn't find it was effective, and fell into coaching and found that to be quite a rewarding experience, which led to other opportunities. And I've worked with all sorts, non-profits, retail businesses, telecoms businesses, all sorts of places. I don't have a fancy shortcut like you, but Arif Bobat, you can look me up on LinkedIn if you need to, and you can find my details. Maybe we'll put it in the description for the pod. I don't know. We'll see if we can figure that out. Yeah. But yeah, lots of roles like that with all those type of clients. And over the years, recently anyway, before setting up Humble, I think one of the things that for me was around culture of organizations, especially, as you said, leadership taking on the responsibility for transforming organizations to apply agile ways of working and to make it a reality. And then finding that was always a challenge. That's very difficult. And so even though we talk about, yes, coaching is one way of helping leaders, I think we've now come to this point where we think actually it's more than that. I think leadership itself needs a acceleration, a boost, if you will, into the next level or stratosphere of what leadership is all about. So that's me, that's TK, that's Humble Associate. Sorry. We're excited to kick this podcast off with this episode today, and we hope you'll enjoy it as well. So I think for our listeners, TK, we should. It's only right that we start off by talking about what do we see in leadership today. What is the state of leadership? Where are we at? Where should it be, perhaps? And maybe use that as a launch pad for some of the ideas that we have about the type of leadership we think we want to see in organizations. I don't know. Do you have something you want to immediate thoughts on that? Do you want to say anything to that?
What I've been, Arif,
go on. Yeah,
because it's interesting where we have to look at it through a societal lens, and you know, if we're taking let's call it the Western culture reference point.
Yeah.
If for instance, look at days gone by when we had political or military leaders, and they defined what leadership was. Nowadays, we have a situation where we have to find our role models in leadership in some other places. And what tends to happen is we are struggling. If we're working a lot with the younger generation, Gen Z, new up-and-coming leaders, and we can clearly see that when it comes to role models for leaders, it's very difficult to find anyone. I think, even if you look at the political or business sphere, I'm not going to talk too much about the likes of Donald Trump or Elon Musk, but, they have a particular brand of leadership which many people don't necessarily like. Plus, if you look at the needs of younger people at work, Gen Z, they have certain expectations. And you need to have leaders that will be able to meet them, to create a situation where the organization culture matches that. And on top of that, after COVID, and if you look at the Western Hemisphere, obviously there's the situation in Ukraine, situation in the Middle East. So things aren't that bright at the moment, and you have to have strong leaders that can possibly take the situation to new heights. Well, for instance, the main market we're operating in, Britain, is at a bit of a crossroads now. And if you look at the UK and see the fact that, we're as a country maybe lacking a bit of leadership to take, the country somewhere after Brexit, after COVID, and after all that, right? And with all these inquiries, you can clearly see there's a bit of a crisis of leadership.
Yeah.
And here we come, all dressed in white to talk about Agile leadership, don't we? So go ahead, Arif. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we're going to come to what Agile leadership is, hopefully a bit later in our podcast, but or episode today. But I think, I was doing some reading and research before today's episode, and one thing that interested me was thinking about it from perspective. What do leaders themselves think about state of leadership and the quality of leadership development as well? That's part of this, right? And so one thing, I mean, I there's a report by a consultancy called Leadership Development. DDI, Leadership Development Consultancy, and they did a report last year, I think, or year before, so quite recent, and they said that only 20, and it said from their research, only 23% of leaders rated their leadership development as high quality, which was quite stark. I mean, that's less than a quarter. That's pretty low.
It is pretty low, but it's not surprising at all.
But that points to a lot of things, right? And I think it points to clearly that the leadership skills and the attributes that they themselves feel they need in order to succeed in the type of environment you described, right? We've got economic challenges, political challenges, and just general business landscape, as you said, here in the West especially. With all of that going on, clearly leaders don't feel they've got the skills they need. That's what that tells me. And I don't know what conversations you have, but I mean, just even anecdotal conversations. I was talking to a colleague and a friend recently who has been, in her role at her organization. She focuses heavily on developing and maintaining the talent pool of leaders in her business, and a lot of them do express fear and worry about not having the right skills to succeed. So this is borne out, and I think it's quite apparent. I'm sure our listeners will have their own opinions and thoughts on this. So, but I think just thinking about that and talking about that, I think is crucial, because it tells us that something has to change. We need leaders looking for something different. We need to offer them something that allows them to have the skills, capability in being able to succeed in this new world. I don't. What do you think? I mean, I've got a few. What do you think this all means, Tika? Or what are you thinking about it now?
Well, I think leadership is not only a skill, it's actually, because it's just so important, it's a meta skill and it's a capability, right? You can't and when it comes to the mindset, which it is, I don't think you can necessarily learn it as you learn everything else, right? I can learn the skill and the knowledge on how to mix podcasts, which I'm going to apply when mixing this one. But the attitude is something different. And I think leadership is something that comes very deep from our soul. Yeah. And in fact, the problem is many times what leaders receive is just teaching. Dare I say e-learning on skills, right? Yeah. Fine. You can learn how to apply a grievance framework or something like that to help your employees in or organization in a different situation. But when it comes to creating the culture of high performance leadership, dare I say agile leadership, which we're talking about, this is much more difficult. And I'm not surprised to see this 23% number, because teaching leadership is a whole other ballgame. But I can't really see teaching leadership is maybe demonstrating and inviting to leadership. It's a whole different area of human experience and existence. Yeah.
No, you're bang on there. I think in what you're saying about it's more than just teaching, right? There's an experiential part. I think that there's always a difficulty. I'm sure this has been borne out since the dawn of this idea of leadership, whenever it started. You can't learn through theory. You got to learn by doing as well, right? So when you actually then step into that role, what if you don't feel confident and comfortable in when you put those shoes on, how will you then get the skills you need, right?
But it's more than that,
Excuse
Arif.
me.
Your cultural imprint of your country, family, upbringing, and your organization too is impacting the way you lead, right? So we learn leadership through osmosis. We observe other leaders. Not many, and it's sad really to see that in the times of yesteryear, we mainly thought that leadership is not a skill, it's not a proper job, it's just an additional thing that a technical expert can have. And yes, technical people can be amazing leaders, but we need to reflect on leadership on its own. And when you do, you will actually see how, because usually what people did is just learned it by osmosis, by role models, by cultural imprints. Now they need to consciously reflect and see how they can become better leaders. And it's not an easy thing to help people do. This is why we're so excited to do that when we're being asked to do that by our clients.
And I think there's other elements or dimensions we need to think about here, which is you touched on it earlier with post-COVID, etc., which is previous mechanisms or previous modalities of learning, of consuming information have now been ripped out, right? So there are we've got social media has obviously had a huge impact on that, right? So attention spans are
Usually
different.
not positive, yeah.
Attention spans are different. So learning mechanisms are different, right? So and we do that. I mean, like if I want to. You listeners may not know I have a motorbike. I like fiddling with it. I don't have a manual. Well, I have, the bike has a manual, yes. But if I need to do some more advanced things, I'm not going to look for a book. I'm probably going to go to YouTube. I'm going to probably find a video. I'm going to watch that and then probably have that playing in the background while I start fiddling with my motorbike, right? And I find that an easy way to learn and implement what I need to do. That's just one example. I'm not directly transferring that to what we're talking about here, but I'm just saying the modality of learning has changed, right? And so
it did, yes. And it's interesting because it's how one way type of learning it is. It is amazing, because one thing you can gain from e-learning is the ability to stop, to rewind, to see a great picture, to have it available at your fingertips from YouTube.
Yes.
But what you don't get is you don't get the ability to share. You don't get the ability to understand what other people feel, for the interaction, right? And this is why we believe doing it in an experiential fashion, in interactive fashion, whether it is remote or in person, makes a difference. But it cannot be e-learning, especially for this kind of mindset aspects like leadership.
That is interesting, obviously, because there may be listeners out there, people out there in the market, who provide this type of capability, who obviously would disagree and say, no, we make things consumable, easy to reach, easy to get hold of, easy access, and you learn at your own pace and all of that good stuff. So you're right, there is definitely a conversation there. Maybe something we'll pick up in a future episode, but I think what we're covering, to summarize some of the points we've been talking about here, which is, look, there are challenges in the state of leadership learning and upskilling and development. How learners consume their information has changed. We need to adapt. The market needs to adapt. We need to provide something there. And also we've talked about the state of the world and the organizations generally are in, mean a different type of leadership is also required. So there's lots of things we're talking about. We need to pick up all these loose strands and kind of bring them together. We'll try and do that. Either some of that this episode, maybe, and also hopefully in future episodes as well. It's a fascinating topic in its own right.
Indeed, yes.
The one thing I think also that needs to be touched on is, like you said, the experiential point, which is, far too often we find the traditional way of teaching is about, let me teach you this thing, and there is nothing beyond that. So it's like, do you understand the theory of this? Yes. Okay, let's move on. Where is the time and space for the leader to then, implement it, try it hands-on for themselves, experience it, confirm that they've understood, what they've applied. So there's other things here, as you said, the experiential element, the teaching mechanism element that needs to be, I think something that we need to think about as well.
Yeah, I think so. But also, that what's interesting to me is like when we've talked about e-learning, I think you can. Okay, I'll be controversial here to say that.
Yes.
There you go. You can learn great leadership from an amazing book, which
Right.
talks about
Yes.
what a great leadership role model thinks,
Yeah.
what they feel, than from a sanitized corporate e-learning course. So that's one thing, right? It's a bit of a controversial statement. The second thing, just to relate to what you said, it's the interactivity, the experiential form is quite important indeed. But this is what I personally believe.
Yeah. And I think also from a coaching point of view, because let's not forget, we as professional coaches, we work with clients, and we know in whether it's one-to-one or group settings, we know how it's important to provide a space for the coachee or the client who's being coached to move to the agenda they need to in their own space and time. So telling them, okay, you need to do this is not going to have an impact, but it's creating an environment where they can have that self-awareness, self-realization of where they need to get to. That's the critical bit, and that's where the kind of click happens for them, or the realization kind of sets in for them. Oh, this is what I need to do in order to be successful, or in order for me to reach my goal, whatever that goal is. So I think, again, there's something missing here, or there's something we need to think a bit more about, is how do we take that mentality into the development process, the leadership development process.
And I actually have a story around that. So I remember when I was in my first job, somehow people thought that I'm high potential. I don't know what got into their heads. So they and it was the time when European Union EFS training, and they sent me for leadership training.
Yes.
I think the providers were quite good, but it was just 3 days, just Friday, Saturday, and Sunday or something. I can't remember exactly.
Yeah.
And they taught me stuff like situational leadership too, other methods. And I was quite happy with what they taught me, but it made nearly zero impact on me at that time. And you know what? When I was moving home, I rediscovered these materials, these prints of PowerPoints, like 10 years later, and I finally said, oh, so that's what it is.
That's what it is, yeah.
I wasn't necessarily ready for it at that time. It was, the trainers were wonderful.
I'm sure,
but I had no ability to apply it,
Yes,
I wasn't at a place that I was able to consume it.
Yeah.
And the best part was, I had no one to tell it to. No one really asked, hey, TK, do you think you can use it in your, really use it with the people that look up to you for leadership? There was no reflection, right? And I hate this kind of learning, even though they were quite talented. They did a great job of lecturing me about these great models, which I still use. And I think we're also using them. But someone needed to ask me, hey, TK, what do you think?
So, and that's an interesting one, because I was reading another a report, HBR report, and and there's a heading in there. It basically says, "What is learned is rarely applied." So that
Sadly,
speaks exactly. So anecdotal. This is the US, but could be representative. So I just read this line to you. Anecdotal evidence on skills transfer suggests that barely 10% of the $200 billion annual outlay for corporate training and development in the US delivers concrete results. That is a staggering amount of waste. So there is something.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, there is something badly wrong there. That if clearly there are problems. There's a gap between teaching and then the application. And maybe your experience, is an evidence point of that.
Well, I'll use a cliche, Arif.
Okay.
I blame the schools.
Okay, yeah.
In a way that, most Western education systems, based on the Prussian model of like 18th century, whatever, I've being educated for a long portion of my life, and I was a young person then, I used to, being overloaded with knowledge, I just treated it as another thing to learn. And since there was no test at the end, what you have to do? You have to learn, pass the test, and forget, because you can only do as much, right? So if people are used to learning this way, and we're used to teaching this way, which many organizations are, I'm not surprised by these statistics you gave.
So the summary, I suppose, is there's work to be done, and there's there's a lot that needs to perhaps change. And I'm sure listeners, if you're listening, we'd love your comments and feedback. I know you can't do it live, but get in touch with us if you feel similarly or different.
We're always up for a discussion.
Yeah, always up for a discussion, and your feedback will be welcome. But this is our perspective on where we think the state of things are. So let's move on, because we have other things to talk about, and the clock is always ticking. So we've called this podcast Leading with Agility. There's a reason for that. We believe that agility or agile ways of working has a part to play in a new type of leadership. So I think it deserves some time from us to explore that in a bit more detail, right? And specifically, I suppose the question is, what's an agile leader then? Why are we here doing this, thinking or believing that there is a space for something different, and we believe that it can affect some of the things that we've been talking about. Not, I know we've talked a lot about the state of leadership development, etc. We also touched a little bit on the type of leadership we need based on the challenges the world is facing right now. So let's go into that a bit more. What's an agile leader? Why do we think we need that? I don't know, TK, do you want to kick us off with any thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's two definitions.
Okay.
One simpler one and one more involved, I think.
Yeah.
I think let's get it out of the way. The simpler one, in my mind, is an agile leader is a leader that's equipped to start and grow agility inside an organization. But I'm cheating here, because I'm now defining one definition with another, which is agility.
Yes.
So let's put that aside, because this is not a podcast about agility, it's a podcast about leadership.
Yes.
Now this gets more interesting. What happens if you define agile leadership as it is without, a circular definition to agility? And we've grappled with it ourselves, Arif, and we came up with a model. So we have some good points. I'll start with the first one, which I believe is the most important, which is an agile leader is someone who is reflective and is able to reflect on their own style, type of leadership, and their leadership actions. If someone asks me, what's the first quality of an agile leader, I would say this: they're able to reflect.
Yeah. Well, I mean, why? And I suppose the antidote of that is the leader who doesn't. I mean, but
I've seen a few.
Yeah, we've seen a few. But I think, why do we think Why do we think someone who is reflective is a key? Is a key. Why do we think reflectiveness is a key attribute? Why do we believe that to be critical with the kind of challenges we've been facing? I think, if I can say something on that, I think it's important. When we have so many complexities in terms of the changing, evolving nature of the employee organizations, with staff with so many different varying needs, right? And constant change in the type of work we're doing and constant volatility. It's important to be someone who has the humility to reflect on your own performance, to then fine tune it and become better. If you are going in and of the concrete belief that you are doing everything the way it should be done and it should never change, you will struggle. Would you agree, TK?
Yes, but also I've got my answer was actually given like 15 minutes ago as a foreshadowing. Because you remember when I said about that it's so people are not being taught leadership, they just learn it via osmosis. They learn it through role models and the culture they're imprinted in. If you're not reflecting on your own leadership, you can't be a better leader. You can't improve your leadership. You can't learn leadership.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of reflecting on leadership on its own, not as a part of something, but as its own mindset, as its own thing.
Yeah.
And the agility, which is getting back to agility, is about continuous improvement, is about continuously chasing value, and so on and so forth. So if you want to be a leader, you also have to continuously improve the way you lead, because, as Arif, you rightfully said, the circumstances will continuously change in the modern world, right? If we had this podcast, I don't know, 5 years ago, I can't believe that, it's nearly 5 years since 2020. But if we had this podcast, 4. If we had this podcast in, I don't know, late 2019, early 2020, I'm sure we would be speaking about a different type of leadership. And now it's also different. And in the next 2 years, it will also be different, right?
Yeah.
And the reflection is the one basic thing you need to have.
Yeah. Okay. No, good point. What are the attributes? I mean, the other thing I think in terms of what makes an agile leader, for us, it's someone who is outcome and value focused. Another important point. And I think far too often we've seen, or I definitely have worked in settings and supported organizations where the output seems to override everything. And then we have challenging conversations when outputs don't meet expectations, irrespective of the value of those outputs. And so then we're in this kind of Kafkaesque type situation where, okay, are we delivering because we have to deliver something? Are we working on something because we have to just get it out? Or are we actually doing it? So no, we are giving value, but we also need that. But that thing doesn't give us, doesn't matter, don't ask questions. So we get into this. I've been in that, I'm sure you've been in that. And I think this is a critical skill, right? If you can understand what outcomes you're trying to deliver, and understand what value is and how you'll measure value, then you're setting yourself and your teams up, whoever you're leading, to success far more easily.
Yeah, and it's being able to align yourself and constantly focus on value, because guess what, right? It's also based on assumptions. So, we have plenty of examples like this ourselves and with our clients, where you think the value is somewhere, you go there and find it somewhere else. And that's fine. As long as you have a compass and you constantly set it to where you think the value is, what's your best guess, right? And some leaders are really struggling with that, with the fact that it's all about the, as you said, output versus outcomes and value. I think a true agile leader is always seeking. Is never content with the fact that they know where the value is.
Yes.
If they're properly reflecting, they will know that the value is always elusive.
Yeah, that's a good point. And this touches on something else very related to that. And you might think, well, why is that so important? I'm working in an industry where perhaps it's pretty clear for me, and it rarely changes, etc. But I think if you're in an organization or a setting or an environment where there are periods of uncertainty and volatility and disruption, right? Then you need to be comfortable leading in that type of environment. So if you're not comfortable with that, and you are struggling with how to deal with that constant, upheaval and change, you will not be able to do some of the things we've been talking about. Being reflective is going to be even harder. Being outcome value focused, even harder. So that's another quality of an agile leader, is someone who is capable, able to lead in a period of uncertainty and volatility.
Yeah, it's interesting to see if there is ever not a period of uncertainty and volatility.
Yeah, exactly.
The VUCA principle, right? Quite soon, the tasks that don't have any uncertainty and volatility will be performed by our wonderful digital friends, the AIs or AGIs, right? Why do you need our wonderful creativity and resources to work with something that's stable? It's a waste of human potential. And, I'm hoping that, we will still be recording this podcast in the perspective of 10 years. And I'm probably also foreshadowing now.
Yeah, exactly. definitely true. And I mean, there's other things that we've been thinking about. What makes an agile leader? I think maybe some of this we'll cover over future episodes as well. But for the sake of
Foreshadowing, yes.
yeah, for the sake of today's episode, and just to kind of set it up for our audience, and so they can get a feel for who we, what does this person look like? Why is this important? Let's circle back a bit and just summarize some of these things. We talk, as we said before, the reflective nature, the comfortability or comfort with, working in that uncertain, volatile space, the outcome and value focus, attribute as well. Why? I mean, generally speaking, going back to some of the challenges we were talking about, TK. Why do you think we need this type of leadership? Why is it critical for the times that we're living in right now? What would you say to people listening?
I think it's interesting.
Yeah.
Yesterday, I've watched the Prime Minister being quizzed by a committee in the Parliament, and he said that we're living in unparalleled times of pressure in terms of the outside of the nation and the international sphere. And one would say that after Brexit, the nation has lost its plot a bit. And I think that's one thing. That's a national, or dare I say global thing. But I want to repeat myself. The reasons are the world is in flux, and there's also a generational change, which we need to observe. And I also believe that, as you can see, we're not necessarily in a period of rapid growth. We are struggling, and I think the majority of the world is struggling to pick itself up. We need something new. Some organizations will struggle, dare I say, win and die. Some will succeed. I don't want to go into this agile spiel of only the strong will survive. I think, we are waiting, dare I say, even in Britain or in some organizations, for leaders to appear to help us take us out of this, I wouldn't say misery, but I say stagnation. Many organizations are stagnant when you think about it, right? Even again, okay, I've mentioned the US and their situation. I've mentioned Twitter, there I say X, right?
Yes.
And you can see what happens when you've got poor leadership in an organization or a country, and what it leads you to, and how people are unhappy about it, right? So, I'm originally from Poland. There has been a change in leadership in Poland recently, and it has given the nation some new energy in an unprecedented scale. So we've always needed great leadership, but hard times create great women and men.
Yes.
But unfortunately, good times do the opposite.
Yeah. Really good summary, TK. Thank you for kind of drawing some of that together. And as I said before, I'm excited to be able to see where our podcast goes over the next forthcoming episodes, because I think we can go into much more detail on some of these attributes.
We probably will.
Yeah, we will. Excuse me. We'll go into much more detail on some of these attributes, so we can start to build up that picture of who this type of person is, what makes them different to to other leaders out there, and why we think they could be successful in organizations. So stay tuned for that, please, and hopefully we'll be covering that soon. But yeah, I think we've had a great discussion today, drawing on lots of different threads. A bit about us, introducing who we are, why we started this podcast. Also, importantly, what this podcast is all about, which we hope you've given you a flavour of. What we're passionate about as well, why we're doing this, and why we think there's space for this type of conversation about the state of leadership, and why leading with agility could be something powerful that the world needs. We hope you've enjoyed listening to us. I think we should draw this to a close. I don't know if you have any closing words for our listeners, TK, before we wrap up.
I've had enough words, but if you like what you've heard and you want to hear more of it, stay tuned for the next episode of Leading with Agility.
Thank you. That's a lovely way of framing the end of our episode. So thank you very much, everyone. We hope you've enjoyed it, and as TK said, stay tuned for our next episode. See you around.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.